My name is Jason Spears. I'm with drpremed.com, and today I want to talk to you about the MCAT. I know you're pre-med. I know you're getting ready for the MCAT. I'm sure you heard a lot of rumors about the MCAT, how it's the biggest test. It makes a huge difference in whether you're going to get into medical school or not, and that's actually true. I have a mentor who's Dr. Bill McDavid, MD, PhD at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine, and his advice to me when I was pre-med was the MCAT's a test you want to take once and only once, and that's 100% true. You don't want to play around with the MCAT. You don't want to have multiple attempts at the MCAT. You want to take this test once and score high on it the first time around. I'm sure as a pre-med student, you're studying hard, you're doing everything you can to do well in the MCAT, and you're probably floundering around trying to figure out what's the best way to approach the MCAT. If you're putting in weeks and weeks of effort and not seeing an increase in your score, or you're still getting a lot of problems wrong, that means your approach to the MCAT's wrong, and that's going to hurt you when you actually go and sit for the exam. So you need to make changes immediately. One of the first things I do when I advise students who are ready to take the MCAT, the first thing I have them do is take a full length or a diagnostic MCAT without opening a book, without studying in advance, or if you've been studying for weeks on end and not making progress, I still want you to take that diagnostic MCAT because that's going to give us a baseline of where you stand with the material and what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths. And unfortunately, you have to do something that goes against the grain in human nature. You have to work on your weakest areas first. A lot of students don't like to do that, but that's the only way you're going to excel on the MCAT. It sucks when you're doing problems and you're getting it wrong, and here you have me telling you, I want you to spend more time with the material that you're getting wrong that you don't know. I know it's a lot easier to do the stuff that you know because it feels good. You get like a bonus or a high because you just got some questions right. Maybe you're scoring at 70–80% and you feel good about that, whereas you don't want to do tackle those hard subject areas because you're going to be scoring into 40 and 50%, and that just sucks for everybody, and it's particularly for you because you want to do well on the MCAT. But those areas where you're scoring 40 and 50%, they're also going to show up on your exam, so you need to do well in those areas to make sure you have a top score for the MCAT. And how you're going to approach those areas is you need to do active studying. You need to do studying where you're getting feedback on your approach. If you're constantly just rereading your notes and doing problems, that's not what you need to do. Problems are a great thing to do, but the other learning aspects need to be there as well. I particularly encourage students to do active learning, which means, are you getting feedback on your studying? If you can't answer whether you're getting something right or wrong, or know if you're making progress, then you're not using an active form of studying, and that's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt you not only in how you're going to be prepared for the MCAT, but also in the type of score that you're going to get on the MCAT. I know as a pre-med student, you're aiming for a top score, and that's definitely what you need to get into medical school. So you need to do an active approach to your MCAT studies to ensure that you're constantly getting feedback in what you're doing. This could be in the form of doing questions where you find out if you're getting something right or wrong. You know, because obviously the question is going to be either or type scenario when it's a multiple choice, or when you're studying, can you teach somebody what you just went over? If you flounder and you can't even make a mini lecture on a topic, that means you don't know it well enough to take an MCAT exam on, or any exam for that matter. Because when you take these exams, it's not about just, oh, I will see it if it appears on the test, I'll be able to recognize it. That's not how the MCAT works. It's a critical thinking test, so you need to be able to think critically. And one way to know whether you can do that or not is the feedback in your performance. If you can't give me a mini lecture on something that you just reviewed, that tells us you don't know it. Or if you're taking practice problems, practice exams, and not scoring well enough, that's another sign that you don't know the material well enough to actually sit for the MCAT, and you absolutely need to have a good score on the MCAT. I want to break things down to you. I know you spent hours and hours in organic chemistry lab in general chemistry lab, doing those physical experiments, all of those labs, goggles on your head, making those red marks around your eyes. They fog up and you just feel like you're missing out on life. But you did that for a purpose. You did that because you wanted to get in medical school and you wanted to be a doctor. That's the same reason you spend hours and hours shadowing, volunteering, and making sacrifices compared to your other friends and family who aren't pre-med, but you're designated yourself that you want to enter a noble profession. And so there's things that you need to do. You need to volunteer, you need to have top grades, you need to have a good GPA, you need to do shadowing, have healthcare experience, and just a whole host of other factors become a competitive applicant for medical school. But I have to tell you something. If you don't have an MCAT score that's competitive, all that stuff doesn't matter. You just wasted 2 to 3 years down the drain. I'm going to actually tell you something what one of my TAs when I was at Harvard Summer School used to say. He would tell, right before our exams, he would tell us how important this exam is, and he would tell us if we don't do well on this exam, no medical school, no surgery, no millions. All down the drain. Well, the implications might not be that severe for you, but that's really the truth of the matter. If you don't get a top MCAT score, you're not going to get into medical school. You're not going to be able to do surgery. If you're in it for the lifestyle, the money, that I don't encourage you to go into medicine for that, you're not going to have that. That's all going to be down the drain. You're going to have to face family and friends who are hoping for you to be the next doctor in the family, and that won't happen if you don't have a good MCAT score. Because what actually happens with getting into medical school, there's so many applicants. Think about this. You have a school that has 120 students that they can accept, but they have 10,000 applicants applying to that school. Obviously, the AdComs aren't going to read 10,000 applications. What they're going to do is they're going to use a computer to screen you. And the fastest way to screen somebody is to have a minimum MCAT cutoff score. Whether it's official policy or not, that's what's happening at a lot of these medical schools, where if you don't meet their minimum cutoff, your application's automatically rejected, tossed to the side. And I hate to get into the numbers with you, but if you look at the most recent data for applying to medical school, 60% of people who apply to medical school the first time around are rejected. Yup, rejected, flat out. They're not getting into medical school. Have to think of career B, maybe have to apply again and hope that they get in the second time around. And I don't want this to happen to you. So the MCAT is the biggest test that stands between you and getting into medical school. So you need to excel on it. You need to do well on it. I gave you a little bit of information on how you can solve this big problem that you're facing, is how to do well on the MCAT. We talked about doing a practice diagnostic test so you know where your strengths and weaknesses are. And then we talked about having feedback and being an active learner. These are some of the skills that you definitely need to employ no matter what you're doing to prepare for the MCAT to have a top score. And if you're able to do this, then you're putting yourself on a solid foundation to do well on the MCAT. I know I just briefly went over all these topics for you, and there's a lot more that I want to share with you to make sure that you get out of MCAT hell as soon as possible and you're once and done with the MCAT. And I designed a course that goes into everything that you need to know for the MCAT. It's a proven systematic approach that students love because they don't have to think about things. They're getting a lot of insights that they never thought about, ways to study, ways to make their schedule for the MCAT, and they're seeing a lot of success with the MCAT. So if you're in a position where you're studying for the MCAT, maybe you're just getting started or you're weeks into your studying and you need help, you need to figure out what's the best way to go about preparing for the MCAT, making sure you're on the path to getting a top score on the MCAT. I'm here for you. So you need to reach out to me, Jason, with drpremed.com, and let's talk about what we can do to make sure you have a top MCAT score that makes you a competitive applicant for medical school and get you some medical school interviews, because it all begins with your MCAT score.